The first lie men are taught about power is that goodness attracts it. From childhood, we are fed a comforting fantasy that integrity rises naturally to the top, that honesty commands respect, that fairness earns loyalty, and that moral excellence is eventually rewarded with authority. This story is repeated so often that it becomes invisible. It is embedded in religion, education, cinema, and family advice. Be good, be patient, do the right thing. Your time will come. But history tells a far colder story. If goodness alone were enough to rule, the world would look very different. The most compassionate men would lead nations. The most truthful voices would dominate courts. The most selfless would command armies. Instead, power repeatedly gathers around men who are feared more than loved, calculated more than sincere, adaptable more than principled. This is not an accident, nor a temporary corruption of an otherwise fair system. It is the system. Machiavelli did not invent this truth. He merely had the courage to say it out loud. The uncomfortable reality is that good men, as society defines them, are structurally unfit for rule, not because they lack intelligence or vision, but because they cling to moral frameworks designed for stability, not dominance. They mistake virtue for leverage, sincerity for strategy, and intention for outcome. They believe the world should reward goodness, and in doing so, they fail to see the world as it is. Power does not rise from moral purity. Power rises from understanding human nature, especially its darker currents. Machiavelli observed something most men spend their entire lives denying. People are not moved primarily by reason or virtue, but by fear, desire, envy, and self-interest. A ruler who assumes loyalty is earned through kindness will be betrayed by the first opportunity. A leader who assumes gratitude lasts longer than advantage will be abandoned the moment circumstances shift. A man who believes honesty disarms enemies will find himself surrounded by those who weaponize his transparency. Against him, good men rarely rule because they refuse to accept this truth until it is too late. They want to be liked before they are secure. They want to be fair before they are untouchable. They want to be moral before they are powerful. And power punishes that order. The world does not oppose goodness out of cruelty. It exploits it out of efficiency. Moral men are predictable. They signal their intentions early. They hesitate when decisive cruelty would resolve a threat. They explain themselves when silence would preserve ambiguity. They forgive when memory would protect them. In environments where power is contested, predictability is weakness. Machiavelli understood that rulership is not a moral position, but a structural one. To rule is not to be good. It is to survive, consolidate, and expand control in an ecosystem of competing wills. Virtue may decorate power, but it does not create it. The mistake of the good man is believing the opposite. Consider how often genuinely decent men are elevated briefly, celebrated loudly, and then removed quietly. They enter leadership with clean hands and leave with broken reputations, scapegoated for failures engineered by those beneath them. They are praised for their ethics right up until those ethics become inconvenient. Then they are called weak, naive, or out of touch. History remembers them kindly. Power does not. This is not because the world hates goodness. It is because goodness, as commonly practiced, lacks teeth. Machiavelli's most disturbing insight was not that rulers must sometimes act immorally, but that morality itself is context-dependent. What is considered good in private life often becomes destructive in public rule. Mercy that saves a soul may endanger a state. Honesty that preserves personal dignity may invite collective ruin. Forgiveness that heals a relationship may embolden rebellion. The good man refuses to make this distinction. He wants the same rules to govern his conscience and his kingdom. Machiavelli knew that this refusal is precisely why such men fall. People say Machiavelli advocated evil. He did not. He advocated realism. He stripped morality of its illusions and examined its consequences. He asked not, is this good, but does this work? That single shift in questioning terrifies moral idealists, because it reveals how often their goodness fails the very people it claims to protect. A ruler who cannot inspire fear when necessary invites chaos. A leader who cannot deceive when required invites manipulation. A man who cannot sacrifice his moral comfort for political survival invites collapse. The tragedy is not that such men lack virtue, but that they mistake virtue for immunity. Good men believe their intentions will be understood. Power assumes intentions are irrelevant. Good men believe consistency proves integrity. Power values adaptability. Good men believe trust is the foundation of loyalty. Power knows dependency is. This gap between belief and reality is where good men lose everything. Machiavelli wrote for rulers who wanted to remain in power, not for saints who wanted to remain pure. And this is why his work has been hated, banned, misunderstood, and yet endlessly relevant. He exposed the silent rule beneath all others, that morality without leverage is decoration, not authority. The uncomfortable truth is that societies do not reward goodness with power. They reward usefulness. A man is elevated not because he is good, but because he is effective. If his goodness aligns with effectiveness, it is celebrated. If it conflicts, it is discarded. Good men rarely rule because they want power to come to them on moral terms. Power never does. Those who rule successfully understand something deeply unsettling. People do not want goodness in their leaders as much as they want certainty. They want order, stability, and protection even if it comes wrapped in harshness. They forgive cruelty faster than weakness. They excuse deception faster than incompetence. They tolerate injustice longer than chaos. The good man is often too honest to manipulate narratives, too fair to favor allies ruthlessly, too empathetic to crush threats early. He waits for consensus while others consolidate control. He assumes shared values where none exist. He believes in reform where domination is required. By the time he realizes his mistake, power has already moved past him. Machiavelli warned that a ruler who relies on goodness alone is like a lamb among wolves, not because wolves are evil, but because they are aligned with their nature. The lamb is not wrong to be gentle. It is wrong to believe gentleness protects it in a hostile terrain. This does not mean one must become a monster to rule. It means one must stop pretending the world is gentle. The most dangerous lie told to good men is that compromise will soften predators. It does not. It teaches them how far they can go. Every concession without consequence invites escalation. Every act of mercy unbacked by strength signals vulnerability. Power respects boundaries, not intentions. Good men often conflate kindness with strength. Machiavelli separated them cleanly. Strength creates the conditions where kindness can exist safely. Without strength, kindness is merely exposure. This is why history's most enduring rulers were not the most moral, but the most controlled. They knew when to appear virtuous and when to suspend virtue. They understood that perception matters more than purity. They curated an image of goodness while privately engaging in calculation. They did not announce their power. They ranged it. The good man wants to rule openly, transparently, and cleanly. Power is rarely built that way. Machiavelli's truth is uncomfortable because it forces a choice: remain good as defined by social ideals, or become effective in a world that does not share those ideals. Most men choose goodness because it feels safe. Power feels dangerous, morally and psychologically. It demands responsibility for outcomes, not just intentions, and so good men remain advisors. Martyrs, symbols, or footnotes praised, remembered, but rarely obeyed. This chapter is not an attack on goodness. It is an autopsy of its failure in the pursuit of rule. Until a man understands why goodness alone does not command power, he will always be confused by his own irrelevance. Machiavelli did not ask men to abandon morality. He asked them to stop worshiping it blindly. Only when a man understands why good men rarely rule can he begin to decide whether he wants to rule at all. Power is not taken from good men by force. It is surrendered by them through misunderstanding. This is the second and more brutal truth Machiavelli uncovered. Most men do not lose power because they are overpowered, but because they misread human loyalty. They believe loyalty is a moral bond. Power knows it is a transactional one. Good men assume loyalty grows from shared values, mutual respect, and ethical leadership. They speak of trust as if it were a permanent structure rather than a fragile arrangement. Machiavelli saw loyalty as something far more unstable, an emotion tied to benefit, fear, and expectation. The moment those conditions shift, loyalty shifts with them. This is not betrayal. It is human nature functioning normally. The good man feels wounded by this reality. He experiences disillusionment, bitterness, confusion. He asks, after all I've done, how could they turn against me? Machiavelli would answer coldly, because what you did no longer serves them. Power does not rest on gratitude. Gratitude decays faster than memory. This is where good men make their most fatal error. They invest emotionally in loyalty. They assume past sacrifices create future obedience. They believe fairness builds lasting allegiance. But people are loyal only as long as loyalty is useful, safe, or necessary. When a stronger protector appears, when fear outweighs affection, when advantage shifts, loyalty dissolves without apology. Machiavelli understood that men obey for two primary reasons: fear of punishment or hope of reward. Love is unstable because it depends on emotion, and emotion changes with circumstances. Fear is reliable because it is rooted in self-preservation. A man may turn against someone he loves, but he rarely turns against someone he fears unless he is sure the fear is gone. Good men want to be loved first. Machiavelli advised being feared first and loved if possible. Not because fear is noble, but because it endures pressure. The good ruler avoids instilling fear because it conflicts with his self-image. He wants to be seen as just, humane, and compassionate. He forgets that people do not measure leaders by intentions, but by consequences. If compassion creates disorder, people resent it. If kindness leads to insecurity, people reject it. The crowd forgives cruelty that brings stability more readily than mercy that breeds chaos. This is the cruel paradox. The good man's desire to protect others often leaves them more vulnerable. Machiavelli observed that people demand moral perfection from leaders only when they feel safe. When survival is threatened, morality becomes negotiable. In times of fear, people gravitate toward those who promise control, not those who promise virtue. They want results, not righteousness. Good men mistake applause for allegiance. They are intoxicated by approval. They think popularity is power. It is not. Popularity is permission, and permission can be revoked. Power is compulsion, the ability to enforce decisions even when they are unpopular. Machiavelli knew that leaders who rely on goodwill alone are hostages to public mood. The moment sentiment shifts, they fall. Those who rely on structured power institutions, loyal enforcers, controlled narratives remain standing even when disliked. This is why good men are often surrounded by smiling faces and empty hands. Their circle appears loyal until tested. When crisis arrives, those faces vanish because loyalty was emotional, not structural. Machiavelli advised rulers to build loyalty that survives discomfort, not loyalty that depends on satisfaction. Another reason good men rarely rule is their aversion to calculated cruelty. They see cruelty as moral failure rather than strategic tool. Machiavelli did not celebrate cruelty. He limited it. He argued that cruelty, if necessary, should be swift, decisive, and purposeful. Prolonged kindness that allows repeated harm is worse than brief severity that restores order. Good men avoid decisive cruelty, hoping problems resolve themselves. They give second chances to enemies. They negotiate with those who exploit negotiation. They delay action in the name of fairness. Each delay teaches adversaries that consequences are negotiable. Power learns faster than morality. Machiavelli warned that unresolved threats do not disappear. They gather strength. Every enemy spared without being neutralized becomes a future rebel. Every challenge unanswered becomes precedent. The good man believes mercy inspires loyalty. More often, it inspires calculation. This is not because people are evil. It is because people adapt. A ruler who never punishes creates an environment where punishment loses credibility. Once punishment loses credibility, authority collapses. At that point, no amount of goodness can restore control. Good men are also destroyed by transparency. They believe openness creates trust. Machiavelli understood that transparency creates predictability. Predictability invites manipulation. When opponents know your principles, they exploit them. When they know your limits, they push them. When they know you will not cross certain lines, they operate freely within those boundaries. The effective ruler keeps intentions ambiguous. He reveals morality selectively. He allows others to underestimate his capacity for severity. The good man announces his ethics proudly. He becomes easy to outmaneuver, Machiavelli understood that perception is a weapon. A ruler must appear virtuous without being enslaved by virtue. He must seem compassionate without being weak, decisive without being cruel, just without being inflexible. This balance is impossible for those who treat morality as absolute rather than instrumental. Good men want to be morally consistent. Power demands situational intelligence. Another reason good men fail to rule is their relationship with conflict. They view conflict as disruption rather than inevitability. They seek harmony where dominance is required. They want consensus where submission is necessary. Machiavelli recognized that conflict is not a failure of leadership. It is its raw material. Those who avoid conflict do not eliminate it. They postpone it until it becomes uncontrollable. The good man hopes his restraint will be reciprocated. Power never assumes reciprocity. It prepares for resistance. Machiavelli's most unsettling insight was that people judge leaders by outcomes, not ethics. A successful ruler is called wise, even if ruthless. A failed ruler is called immoral, even if sincere. History rewrites morality around victory. This is why good men who fail are remembered as naive, while ruthless men who succeed are remembered as necessary. Good men seek moral validation. Power seeks survival. There is also a deeper psychological trap. Good men derive identity from being good. Their self-worth is tied to ethical self-image. Any action that threatens that image feels like self-betrayal. Machiavelli separated identity from strategy. He understood that rulership requires masks. The ruler is not his private self. He is a function. The good man cannot tolerate this split. He wants alignment between who he is and what he does. Power often requires disalignment. This internal conflict paralyzes him at critical moments. He hesitates when decisiveness is required. He compromises when firmness is needed. He explains when silence would protect him. His conscience becomes his vulnerability. Machiavelli did not ask rulers to abandon conscience. He warned them not to let conscience rule them. The truth is brutal but clear. Good men rarely rule, because ruling is not about being good. It is about managing fear, desire, perception, and force in a world that does not care about intentions. Those who refuse to accept this either withdraw from power voluntarily or are removed by those who do. Power does not reward moral comfort. It rewards effectiveness. By the end of this chapter, the illusion should be shattered. Goodness does not fail because it is wrong, but because it is insufficient. Until a man understands that loyalty is conditional, fear is stabilizing, and morality is contextual, he will remain unfit to rule. In the next chapter, the final truth emerges why, even knowing all this, most men still choose goodness over power, and why the cost of ruling may be higher than any moral price. The final reason good men rarely rule is the one few are willing to admit. Even to themselves, most men do not actually want power once they understand what it demands. They want the rewards of power: respect, security, admiration, control over outcomes, but not the psychological isolation, moral burden, and constant vigilance that true rule requires. Power is not merely a position. It is a permanent condition of tension. Machiavelli understood that ruling is lonely by design. The more power a man accumulates, the fewer truths he is told. The higher he rises, the more people speak to him with intention rather than honesty. Good men crave sincerity. Power attracts performance. This alone breaks many. A ruler cannot afford emotional transparency. He cannot reveal doubt freely. He cannot confess weakness without consequence. Every emotion becomes data for others to exploit. Good men want to be understood. Power requires being unreadable. This is where many men retreat, not because they are defeated, but because they are exhausted. The good man desires peace of conscience. Power offers no such peace. Every decision creates enemies. Every victory plants resentment. Every benefit granted to one group alienates another. There is no moral equilibrium in rule-only trade-offs disguised as principles. Machiavelli saw clearly that ruling means accepting permanent moral debt. A ruler survives by making choices that cannot be morally clean. Someone must be disappointed. Someone must be sacrificed. Someone must bear the cost. The good man asks, "Is this right?" The ruler asks, "Is this necessary?" That difference is everything. Even when good men understand fear, loyalty, and perception intellectually, they often cannot integrate them emotionally. They feel guilt where calculation is required. They feel shame where detachment is needed. They experience internal conflict not because they are weak, but because their values were built for private life, not public domination. Power demands emotional compartmentalization. The ruler must act without becoming what he acts out. This split is psychologically expensive. Most men cannot sustain it without breaking or becoming something they despise. Machiavelli knew this cost well. He never promised that power was noble. He warned that it was heavy. Another truth emerges here. People romanticize being ruled by good men, but they do not actually submit to them. They test them. They push boundaries. They demand exceptions. They exploit leniency. Good men inspire hope, but hope does not enforce obedience. Power must be renewed constantly. It decays the moment vigilance relaxes. There is no final victory, no moment where one can say, "I have secured my position forever." Good men want closure. Power offers none. This is why ruthless men often appear calmer in leadership, not because they lack conscience, but because they accepted early that power is maintenance, not achievement. The good man keeps waiting for the moment when he can finally relax and be himself. That moment never comes. Machiavelli understood that people secretly resent moral superiority in rulers. It reminds them of their own compromises. A ruler who appears too virtuous invites hostility, skepticism, and eventual rebellion. People prefer leaders who feel human, flawed, and capable of hardness. Moral perfection alienates. Thus, good men often fail not because they lack strength, but because they inspire unrealistic expectations. When they inevitably fail to meet them, disappointment turns into betrayal. There's also a darker truth. Power requires the willingness to let others suffer. For a greater outcome, good men personalize suffering. They feel every consequence. Machiavelli depersonalized it. He treated suffering as inevitable and sought only to control its scale and direction. A ruler who cannot tolerate being hated will never rule for long. Hatred is not a failure of leadership. It is proof of consequence. Every meaningful decision creates opposition. The good man wants universal approval. Power makes that impossible. This is where the final choice appears. To rule, a man must accept that he will be misunderstood, judged, accused, and morally condemned, often by those he protects. He must accept that history may absolve him long after his lifetime, but his contemporaries will not. He must trade inner comfort for outer control. Most men, when faced with this trade, choose goodness, and that is not weakness. It is preference. Machiavelli never said good men should rule. He explained why they usually don't and why that outcome is stable. Power selects for those willing to bear its cost. Those unwilling are filtered out, not by injustice, but by incompatibility. The greatest irony is this: good men are often happier without power, and rulers are rarely at peace with it. The world is not ruled by the best men, but by those most suited to rule. Suitability is not morality. It is endurance. So the uncomfortable truth completes itself. Good men rarely rule, not because the world is cruel, but because power is honest. It demands sacrifice of illusion, identity, and moral comfort. Only those willing to pay that price remain standing. Machiavelli did not glorify this reality. He revealed it. The final lesson is not that goodness is foolish, but that ruling is not virtuous. It is functional. Those who confuse the two suffer. Those who separate them survive. And that is why history remembers so few good rulers and so many effective ones.